Imagine choosing your desert island discs. Would you choose records that you loved straight away, or ones that took you a little longer to get? One of mine was Pulp's Common People. Somehow it managed to be both. It was instantly catchy, but underneath it was a song about the difference between visiting someone else's world and actually living in it. And it was inspired by someone Jarvis Cochran met at St Martin's College. Not this St Martin's, admittedly, but it's a useful thought when you arrive on someone else's island carrying a camera. Because this St Martin's is remarkably easy to fall in love with. The beaches are beautiful, the water ridiculously clear. So is it just possible that, like the best records, the best places you visit can win you over immediately and still give you a reason to keep coming back for more? Okay, let's park the Britpop metaphor for a moment and go back to how the day began. St Mary's Harbour was sitting beneath a shifting blanket of sea fog, and Selenium 3 emerged through the murk while the smaller inter-island boats carried on with the daily business of moving people around the Isles of Scilly. Our tripper boat for the day was Surprise. We boarded from the harbour steps, slipped past the Selonian and headed around the coast of St Mary's, with St Martin's still hidden somewhere ahead. The fog on Scilly rarely seems to sit still. It drifts, it breaks apart and it reforms. One moment it's ahead of you, the next it's gathering behind. The weather here, it can feel as though somebody's rolling dice to decide what you're going to get next. And today, somehow, they landed on bright sunshine and thick sea fog. Seabirds stood guard on the rocks as we made our way along the coast. Bar Point stood out sharply in the sunshine. Then, almost as quickly, it disappeared beneath a band of fog. Ahead, St Martin's was still sitting beneath clear blue sky, for the moment at least. As we approached St Martin's, the boatman eased off the power and we began to glide towards Lower Town Quay. St Martin's has two main quays, and the tide largely decides which one you'll use. Today it brought us to Higher Town at the eastern end of the island. And from here we would follow the coast to Perpitch and Perpitch, then climb across Chapel Down to the Daymark. And after that we would eventually follow the northern side of the island and then turn back through its centre and eventually reach Lower Town for our boat home. Leaving the quay, we passed the water sports centre and began working our way around the coast. From here we got our first view inland towards Higher Town, sitting along the raised spine of the island. Although inland is a relative term on St Martin's, the sea is never far away. Our route crossed the cricket pitch, briefly accompanied by a Royal Mail van making its way around the boundary. Beyond it, the path dropped towards Perpitch. Clear water, pale sand, and even on a beautiful summer's day, barely a dozen people across the whole beach. Sitting just offshore, a fishing boat was working, its engine puttering as gulls crowded behind it, feasting on the scraps thrown from the boat. Leaving Par Beach, we followed the coast towards Perpitch. The Eastern Isles lay across a sea that looked almost too turquoise to be real. Behind us, St Mary's had disappeared into the fog again, while St Martin's remained in full sunshine. And Perpitch was quieter still than Par Beach had been, just two people, having the entire beach to themselves. St Martin's was continuing to deliver the big tunes, another beautiful beach, another clear sea, and almost nobody there. It wasn't making us work very hard. From Perpitch, the path began to climb across Chapel Down, and the Daymark appeared ahead. It's always reminded me of the moon rocket from the Tintin books. Every time I see it, I half expect Tintin to appear, followed by Captain Haddock and Snowy. Well, the reason it's here is rather more serious than that. In 1683, sailors could judge how far north or south they'd travelled reasonably well. But working out how far east or west they were was much more difficult. And that was a serious problem around Scilly. The islands lie low in the water, surrounded by reefs and hidden rocks. Fog can make whole islands disappear, leaving a crew unsure which piece of land had just emerged through the gloom. Sir Thomas Eakins had a great stone beacon built on the highest point on St Martin's. No flame, no machinery, just something unmistakable that sailors could recognise from miles away. A lighthouse for the daytime, although it would not originally have looked quite like this. For more than a century, the Daymark was actually painted white, and then in the 1830s it turned red, before eventually acquiring the red and white bands that we recognise today. Beside the Daymark are the much quieter remains of an early medieval chapel. Very little survives above ground, although its plan suggests it may date from somewhere between the 8th and 10th centuries. From Chapel Down, the route ahead looked almost suspiciously inviting. A long sweep of coastline, a succession of nearly empty beaches, and water in almost every shade of blue. Below us was Bread and Cheese Cove, a name that sounds as though there ought to be a good story behind it, and perhaps there is, but on St Martin's, it somehow feels unnecessary to go looking for one. As we followed the coast, another version of St Martin's began to appear. From the sea, the island looks open and exposed, but look inland and it's divided into tiny fields enclosed by high hedges and banks. For centuries, people here have divided a landscape shaped by wind and salt into small, sheltered spaces where things can actually grow. Eventually, we turned away from the coast and entered the narrow lanes through the middle of the island. The views became smaller: cottages, fields, small holdings, and the post office appeared between the hedges. Meanwhile, the place names remained reassuringly direct: Great Bay, Little Bay, Higher Town, Lower Town. Nobody seems to have wasted much time on overcomplicating things here, and I quite like that. A little further on, and we found one of Scilly's many honesty boxes. This one belonged to St Martin's School, and it appeared to be a frog. At least I think it was a frog. We passed the Island Hall with its rather mysterious silver sphere. Below us were Great Bay and Little Bay, looking almost absurdly tropical in the sunshine. There are moments when describing scenery becomes fairly pointless, and I think the pictures can make their own case. Great Bay is often described as one of Britain's finest beaches, and today it was very easy to see why. But perhaps St Martin's makes beauty look so effortless that you begin to take it for granted. On almost any other British coastline, this would be the main event. Here it's just like the next beach along the path. Beyond Great Bay lies White Island, and as you can see, at low tide, a narrow strip of sand and rock appears and you can walk across. So we could have crossed that day, but we had pressing business because we developed a thirst. So White Island was going to have to wait. We left the coast before reaching Porth Seal, another one on St Martin's list of place names that need very little explanation. And we cut inland through the middle of the island, and the change was immediate. The wide views disappeared. High hedges and thick vegetation closed around the path with patches of sunlight breaking through. The pub hasn't been there for thousands of years, but the fact that the path now brings you straight into its garden feels like a very happy accident. From the pub, we drop down towards Lower Town Quay, and right beside the quay is the Karma Hotel. Whenever I hear the word karma, I can't help thinking about Culture Club's Karma Chameleon, and it takes me back to that opening question. It's catchy, immediate, and undeniably effective on a dance floor, and to be fair, it certainly stood the test of time. But is it one of the records I would choose to take to my desert island? Nah, probably not. And our walk met the sea again, and after only a few hours, St Martin's had shown us exactly why people love it. It's known as the island with the beaches, and quite rightly, they are extraordinary. Yet even in the middle of the summer, you may find barely a dozen people on one. But St Martin's never feels like a resort. It has working boats, small farms, thriving local businesses, very good places to eat and drink, and people just getting on with island life. And there's views across so much of Scilly, clear water in every direction, and a sense of calm that is not always easy to find. Perhaps it really is one of those rare records that wins you over on the first listen and keeps giving you reasons to come back for more. And right on cue, Surprise arrived, ready to take us back to St Mary's, and the quay filled, the boat loaded, and for a few minutes everything became hectic. Then we pulled away and watched St Martin's settle back into its own rhythm. St Martin's hadn't made us work particularly hard to love it, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I will certainly be coming back for more.